I'm Joyce Hornady. You might say accuracy is my business. I make bullets.
You are listening to the Hornady Podcast.
Thanks for joining us and enjoy the show.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the Hornady Podcast. I'm your host, Seth, and today I have some special guests all the way from not very far away. I have Chad and I have Phillip from Garmin. Guys, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Pleasure
to be here.
Yeah, and not much of a scenery change driving up from old KC.
I thought I was in Kansas the whole way.
Yeah. Feels like it. Yeah,
Yep.
You go about 90 miles further, and then you're in a whole nother universe. Doesn't look anything like it, like Kansas. But appreciate you guys coming up. I know you guys are close. It's only 4.5, 5-hour drive from KC to get up to Grand Island. But your guys' first trip to Hornady, and I'd like to know, Grand, you got to see some of the things behind the scenes that not everybody gets to see, and you got to see it real fast because we got an abbreviated timeline. You're not here for a long time, but I want to show you what we got going on. So what do you guys think of Hornady manufacturing?
I mean, I couldn't really appreciate the scale when you think about it until I saw it in person, just how big it is and just the passion in the people that you can see, putting these products together it just blew my mind. And then the new distribution center, like that we're talking in, like we're on the mezzanine.
We're on top of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's top notch, world class. You should be really proud of this.
It's been a long time coming, and over the 11 years that I've been here, seeing that evolution to where we are now is pretty remarkable. Phillip, you ever been anything like this?
No, and the insane attention to detail with everything. Just like how much, I guess, detail is put into every little step of the process and how much attention to detail is is put into it.
Yeah, and the quality control.
Yes.
I think your customers should really appreciate the fact that, when they buy a bullet from Hornady, that it's going to do exactly what you say it will do and perform to the specs, on the box. It's clear that you guys take that very, very seriously.
Yeah, we definitely do. And I feel like one of the most important things, I say this on a ton of podcasts, and I hope, although you haven't got to interact with very many people here, one of the things that I hope comes through when I bring guests to our facility is the fact that, okay, you talk to me. Well, I'm a lifelong hunter and a long-range competitor and all these things. Well, if you go down onto the production floor and just stop and ask somebody, hey, do you shoot? You're going to find competitors. You're going to find hunters. You're going to find 3-gun. You're going to find long-range. I mean, you're going to find people that come to work, put their nose to the stone because they care about these products and how they're used because they use them themselves. And that's really what drives our product innovation is we use the products. We want to find products that make our experience better. So that's why we innovate new products, which ties right in to one of your new products, one that has taken the shooting community by storm, talking none other than the Garmin Zero C1. That thing absolutely went from nobody ever saw it coming to holy cow.
Yeah, that was we started that project during COVID.
Oh, wow.
We have a special area of Garmin that does R&D stuff that's not in the iterative products. Once we build one of something, the customers will typically tell us, here's how to make it better, and then we'll do a Rev 2 and Rev 3. Mm-hmm. But this particular segment goes out and looks for new opportunities in the market. And so they had approached me as the product manager for our sportsman category and some of our tactical stuff and said, hey, there's a market need for a good chronograph that is easy to use and accurate and can fit in your pocket. And
it's a tall order.
I'm sold. But for me at the time, I was an archery guy. I still am. That's my true passion.
Absolutely.
But there's plenty of shooters around Garmin. And
yeah. Well, you come from a big buck state. You need every advantage you can get, and a longer season usually helps.
I saw a few 160-inch bucks on some toolbox today. Pictures of those.
Well, we've killed some good deer around here.
So, but yeah, for me, I mean, even from the archery side, I never really know how fast my bow's going. I've got a light gate chronograph, but it's difficult to set up, and so it's really not even worth it, right? But this thing, it just tracks everything.
Just works.
We've had people call us and say it tracks bull whips, it tracks rubber bands, Nerf guns. If it's over 100 feet per second and under 5,000, it's going to pick it up.
Wow. So that's remarkable. And I can't wait to hear more about that innovation. But before we get there, the listener probably needs to know a little bit more background on you guys because I mentioned we're passionate about what we do, and not everybody is necessarily a shooter or a hunter. A lot of us are. I'd like to hear where you guys grew up, how'd you ended up at Garmin, and on this project specifically. Did you grow up shooting? Do you shoot now? And I'd like to hear, because I think that might tie into the innovation of the product.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead and kick it off, Phillip.
Yeah, so I grew up in Baldwin City, Kansas, which is just south of Lawrence, so little suburb outside of Kansas City. And then, yes, kind of grew up in a hunting family, a little bit of rifle hunting for deer and stuff, but nothing crazy. The guns didn't come out much besides hunting season.
Yeah.
A lot of bird hunting, though.
Oh, in Kansas?
In Kansas, you couldn't beat it back in the day. But a lot of chasing roosters. But
and you're a software engineer.
I am a software engineer. Yeah, sorry, that didn't get mentioned. But
that's all right.
So, that was kind of my background in guns. Not a whole lot, but
they were a tool.
They were a tool for us then. And then I went to school at K-State, so Kansas State University. So I have a degree in computer science. Straight out of college, I got hired on the Garmin, and it was actually kind of funny. One of my origin stories is I was sitting in the lobby and being kind of a redneck kid. I was sitting in the lobby and a ad for the Zero A1i Pro or A1 bow sight came on, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool." Before I went into my interview, and I was brought it up in the interview, and they're like, "Oh, you're actually interested in that stuff?" I was like, "Absolutely, yeah. I grew up hunting. All this stuff's cool to me." They're like, "Absolutely, you're the guy now. You are now one of the Zero people."
That's so cool.
Not a really big team of us, but yeah. We all kind of share that background.
That is a neat background, and your background very similar to a lot of people in our buildings here. In that, you say, redneck. No, hey, we're out here on the prairie getting it done, and some, hunting, fixing stuff, like that's just part of the culture.
Right, exactly.
And it develops a work ethic that I think is unrivaled, or that I've never witnessed anywhere else in the world, for that matter. I mean, you get a culture that values that work ethic, and that goes a long way.
Right.
What about you, Chad?
So I'm from Great Bend, Kansas, which is right in the middle of the state if you've never been down there. And it looks a lot like Grand Island. Like there's a major street through the center of town, and like that's where all the businesses are, and then the houses spread out from there. So I didn't really get into hunting and fishing, or not fishing, but hunting so much until I was like in college. And my buddies were like, we had a lot of time to kill because we were going to class, but it wasn't all that difficult to start. And then you get towards the end, and it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, what was I doing?
So buddies got me into rifle hunting and started doing that and enjoying that. And then I graduated from K-State, and I'm an industrial engineer. And I got my first job at Honeywell FM&T, and that's in Kansas City. And the cool thing about that is we made non-nuclear components for nuclear weapons. It sounds a lot cooler than it really was.
Okay.
But I got to work with a lot of really interesting people, go to like national labs and take their designs, and we would basically manufacture their designs. And while I was there, I met a guy, and he introduced me to bow hunting. And I'm like, once you do that once, he's like, this is the best thing ever. Like that intense 30, 40 yards and in experience you get is just, it's unrivaled in my opinion. So I did that for about 5 years, but I was working in like the southeast corner of Kansas City Metro, but I lived in Olathe, like a half mile south of some giant building that I drove past every day that said Garmin on it. And it was about 5 years in, a buddy from K-State who was working at Garmin called me and said, "Hey, you should come over and you should be an industrial engineer here. We just built this new warehouse and we need a bunch of help." And I'm like, okay, sounds good.
Yeah.
So I took that job, and my commute went from 20 miles to a half a mile, and things were going great. And then I've just naturally progressed through different roles at Garmin. So I went from doing industrial engineering stuff in the warehouse. I became a project manager where I just worked on bigger things for the warehouse. Then I went over to quality for a little bit, and in quality I was supporting the outdoor segment, which is where this chronograph came out of that segment.
Okay.
But did that for a couple of years, and I was tapped on the shoulder and asked, "Hey, you seem to have a passion for, hunting and shooting and being outdoors, and these are some of the tactical products we're looking to make in the future. Would you be interested in being a product manager?" And I said, "Well, I don't know if I'd be any good at it." So I kind of did a trial run with a product that was already kind of in the pipeline, and I guess I didn't screw it up too bad. So it's just kind of grown from there. So I've been at Garmin 16 years. I've been doing the product manager thing for about 6 or 7 now. Starting to lose count.
Wow.
Yeah. But
good for you.
It's fun. I mean, I basically just come up with, I take input from a lot of different areas, sales, customers, other idea workshops at Garmin, just people in the hallway, and try to put all those things together and figure out what customer need do we need to go solve. And then I write a document that says, if we go build this thing and it does these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like it will be successful and people will buy it and it will make their lives better because of it. And then guys like Phillip and a bunch of other really talented engineers are the ones that put it together and make it happen.
Wow.
So
That sounds like a cool place to work.
He has a terrible job, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He just has an army of engineers that make his wildest dreams come true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. And I got off the technology train when I graduated high school. So to me, what you do as a software engineer, it's just be voodoo, witchcraft. It's kind of like the wind. I can't see it, and it just messes everything up. And sometimes it's magic. It's phenomenal.
Find the latest shirts, hats, hoodies, and accessories that you see here on the podcast and much more at HornadyGear.com.
So that sounds, again, like a couple cool roles for you guys, and that product development, that innovation. Obviously, you guys are known, Garmin is known for that innovation over a pretty broad scope of products. When we look at the Garmin Zero specifically, at least for me, I didn't see it coming. When you look at historically the product lines that you guys been involved in, I wouldn't have put those together. And when you look at chronographs as a whole, I mean, we've come a long way from 1700s, 1800s ballistic pendulums, where you basically shoot a chunk of wood and measure how far it moved, right?
Yep.
All the way up to, I feel like a lot of us in this industry cut our teeth with chronographs using the shoot through the screen, the old school, like the Pro Chrono. And you can still buy those things, which is borderline comical because if Saturn blocks Jupiter this week, you can't use it because of this cover. And then if the clouds are out, you don't get a good reading. And, sometimes you'll have the gas outrun the bullet. So you'll get the velocity of what that ejecta is, not the bullet. And those had their, problems, if you will. But that was kind of the industry standard for a long time. And, we've really seen a shift from that old school technology that really ran that was the way for starting in the 90s until, on the commercial side, like a guy could go buy one, until not that long ago. And now we're seeing that shift into Doppler radar, which for the listener out there, if you haven't, we have a whole podcast dedicated to the Doppler radar. So that's Jaden, that's Jacob, our Doppler experts, going over the science, how Doppler radar works. But before we get into the design of the Garmin real quick, Phillip, in simple terms, you got a Doppler radar. How does it measure velocity? What's it doing?
Yeah, so projectile fired out of whatever system you have, right? Doppler radar is constantly sending out radar signals, listening for something, some kind of response back. So if there's something moving downrange, we will get a response back off of that projectile, in this case. And then there's a certain Doppler shift that happens, and measuring that Doppler shift is effectively how you're able to actually calculate speed or velocity.
Yep, I like it. So you've got super advanced technology. Now, Hornady, we have a giant, $100,000+ radar, which has now kind of become the industry standard. We've had that for a decade now. We've shot nearly 250,000 bullets over it. Well, that's friggin' huge. It's like half the size of this table, and it costs six figures. What was the initiation for you guys? Like, hey, we need a pocket radar. We need something that's the size of a cell phone that will measure anything from, like you said, high-speed Nerf darts to bullets going 4,500 feet per second. What was the push for you guys to jump into a segment where you've really never been?
Well, we've always had, not always, but we had radar technology that we brought into the Garmin lineup when we did our Varia bike radar. So if you're not familiar with that product, it's a radar that mounts on the back of your bike, and then you've got a head unit on the front. And so you can keep your eyes down the road, and then your head unit would start to tell you when there's a car approaching from behind. So it's using that same technology.
Okay.
So it makes it a lot safer to ride a bike because you don't have to turn and look, and you can tell what's coming up on you and how fast it's coming up on you. So for us, it's, I look at it like a toolbox. We have a whole bunch of different technologies, and then we go and we say, well, what problem is out there that we could solve for somebody? So in this particular case, we have radar technology, and the chronographs on the market today are either too bulky or too expensive, in yours' case, right? Or difficult to use, or not reliable, or
the
whatever.
Shoot through the screens method,
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, people just want stuff to work. Like I used to tell people, like I'll give a shout out to DeWalt, but that's the only tool I buy. And there's a lot of other good brands out there, but you get to a point in your life where like I just want to buy it one more time and have it, and I know it's always going to work when I go to fire it up. So same thing. I mean,
You got a Milwaukee man behind you.
Oh,
there.
well. Nothing wrong with those. If that would have been the first one somebody put in my hands, I'm sure that's where I'd be. But for us, part of our mission statement is to be an essential part of somebody's lives. And so what I take that to mean is that you won't go do the thing you're passionate about doing unless we're along for the ride. So a runner, if they're truly passionate about running, they're not going to go for their run without their watch. If they forgot their watch, they're going to go back in their house and get it, as opposed to just saying, "Oh, I'll run without it today." So everything we do, we're trying to make something that somebody deems essential. That and not to, we don't want to take away from the experience. We want to enhance it. So there's a fine line there, right? You don't want to do too much for somebody. You don't want it to be like, I can't think of an example at the moment.
Yeah, you don't want it to be something to do things for you that you should be doing for yourself, kind of deal.
Right. Help you get better at your craft. But so that's kind of where that chronograph was born. As I said, we started that working during COVID, which was interesting, right? Because we all, like a lot of folks, took our computers and went home and had little offices in the basement with. My kid was around the corner playing Xbox and yelling, and I'd be like, "Hey, keep it down! Dad's trying to make money." But it was interesting because we're such a big company. Like we're headquartered out of Olathe, Kansas. That's Garmin International, but we have manufacturing and distribution all over the world. And so some of the technologies that we use sometimes those experts aren't in our same time zone or even on our same continent. And so this is the radar was a case like that where we're really going to be challenged. Like we're all at home, we're all in the computer screens all the time, and we're working across continents. So it's a testament to the team that we were able to bring it all together and get it tested. And I saw your armory today. We don't have an armory like that, right? So
product testing was a little more involved.
Well, yeah, but if we do another one, I'll be coming up here.
Oh yeah.
Hey, what you got?
Yeah. Well, you did a great job with it, and I want to know from a size standpoint, to me, that's one of the things that stood out before I got to use it, before any of the user interface portions of it. The fact that, look at this thing, you mentioned that was kind of one of the first design parameters. Was it difficult to get it that small?
What's interesting? It was supposed to be smaller than it is. We needed some extra size to get the radar board a little bit bigger in order to get better performance.
Sure.
That drove us. I was like, well, if we have to grow the radar board a little bit, let's put a bigger display in there. And I mean, that display is not big, but it was going to be even smaller than it was when we first set out. Like,
really?
Yeah. And, it was like, to me, it wasn't a difficult decision. I felt like it was as small as it was, even as it grew. I still think this will be okay.
100%.
But I don't even remember how small it was going to be, but maybe too small. Maybe it would have got lost.
Yeah, right. No kidding. And we know we've got many, many, many of them around our office now. I should have brought one to set up here on the table. Phillip, when you're tasked with, hey, you need to get all of that software on some hardware that has to fit in this tiny little box, did that present some trouble?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest piece for us so I'm a high-level software engineer, so I work on all the user interface facing stuff. Really the big thing was usability. So like, this thing has to be as simple, as few clicks to use as possible.
Right.
I wanted to remove all those barriers that I could just to make it like the best that it could be.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really where our focus went in. But yes, from a size perspective, we were running tight. We were packing as many clowns into that little car as we could.
Well, you did a good job with that. And I'll say from the user interface standpoint, one of the things with some pre-existing little radar boxes that I had trouble with was like just going back. I just want to go back a screen. Mm-hmm. And there was a long time I didn't know how to do that. And deleting individual shots or deleting shot strings, it just was a little bit clunky. And we got our first test samples in right before the launch of the Garmin Zero. And our marketing director received the package. He handed one to me. I went downstairs into our lab, and he said, just go figure it out, see if you can use it. I didn't look up any instructions. I didn't do nothing. I turned it on. I haphazardly pointed at the direction I was shooting, and it captured every shot and was on top of the Ailer printout of the velocity. So it's like, well, that's kind of weird. So then I redid another test shot of 20 samples, but I actually made sure I was within the 5 to 15 inches of offset and everything. Did that, and it worked great. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, now does it work with archery? That was a big question. And our boss, my boss, marketing director Neil Davies, took it home, set it up on his grill, measured 20 yards, and tossed some arrows down there, and it picked it up right away, no problems. So then it was, well, how does it do with a suppressor? How does it do with the muzzle brake? And it's yet to have really any failures. I've been blown away with that. How did the design go there to make it sensitive enough to pick up a suppressed shot, a bow, something like that, where historically has been a little bit trouble to get it triggered?
Well, I think that's what Doppler does for you. It doesn't care. It doesn't need a sound or an impulse. It's just looking for, in the way our system designed, it's just looking for a projectile going away from it.
Okay.
So, like if a bird flies by it perpendicular to it doesn't pick that up. If it does, it'll reject it. So it's got an algorithm in there that's basically saying that's not a thing that I should have tracked. Even though it did track it, it knows to kick it out. It's the same thing with like the cross booth thing that people were like, well, if you set them up too close to each other, are they going to be picking up my buddy's shot in the next booth over? And I mean, I don't think the spec it's like 3 meters
it's
or
a meter and a half.
Meter and a half, so 3 feet roughly. I mean, you probably shouldn't be closer than 3 feet.
Yeah, you shouldn't be
no.
Spooning while you're shooting
exactly.
on the range. All right, yeah, separate yourselves there.
Yeah, unless you enjoy muzzle blast and eating somebody's dirt. But
the Hornady Security Fireproof Keypad Safe. With a heavy-duty 16-gauge steel body, extra thick 8-gauge steel door, and 4 1-inch diameter locking lugs, the fireproof safe achieves a fire rating of 30 minutes for up to 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. Both the interior and adjustable shelf are covered in a protective carpet that offers flexible storage configurations while safeguarding valuables from damage. The Fireproof Keypad Safe from Hornady Security.
So, yeah, I mean, but all that, takes time to work all that out, and Phillip worked really closely with the low-level software guys that manage the algorithms to make sure that all works, and then it's just an iterative process of testing over and over again. And Phillip and his team are really responsive to me when I make a request for something. So, well, I can't remember exactly what drove me to ask this, but like it used to, when we first had it, like you would just shoot and it would pick up a shot and it would give you the number. And then you'd take another shot, and it would pick that shot up and show you, okay, that was shot 2, and it was whatever, 27.52. But I was like, Phillip, like it does it so fast, I don't even know that it did it. You know what I mean? And
there was no way to tell
that
it actually was processing the previous shot. So if the 2 shots were close enough in shot speeds, you didn't know that it picked up the shot unless you looked at the tiny little shot number. Yeah.
So I was like, hey, you need to give me just a spinner. And he's like, well, it won't be up for more than a second or two. I'm like, I just need to see the flash to know that it got it, so that I know like it's good. And
in truth, I thought it was a terrible idea.
I'm glad it's there,
I thought it was a terrible idea.
Yeah, if you stack up velocities, and then even if you miss the spinner, you look back, you're like, well, I've used it enough now that I don't even question if it picked it up or not. But, yeah, that's great. It's great to have a team, and it's great to be able to collaborate like that. And I know you mentioned in COVID how difficult that was when everybody's out of the office. So coming back to the office, that's, Hornady doesn't have remote workers either. And I think a lot of our innovation is helped along because we're in the hallways together. We're in each other's office. We're shooting together. We're doing whatever. And you're together sharing those experiences, conversing back and forth. It's a lot easier to drive that innovation when you're there.
Yeah. I mean, people are meant to be in groups or tribes or whatever, right? We're meant to like interact with each other, and that's a big part of the Garmin culture too. Is seeing people you haven't maybe seen, because it's a big place too, right? And so maybe I go to maybe there's a workshop over lunch in the auditorium, and I see somebody I haven't seen, and it's always like, well, hey, what are you working on? I'm doing this, and I'm telling them what I'm doing, and it's like, oh well, if you did this and that together, like you could solve this other problem, and there's a lot of that synergy that happens there, and it's just a really fun work environment to be in.
It's a good culture for sure, it sounds like. So you guys, you get this product across the finish line. You're sending out some samples. Like I said, we got some pre-production samples.
I got some beef on that with you guys,
what
actually.
Happened?
So I guess Neil had seen one of these at some event he was at.
Yep.
And Brian had known him. Brian's my boss, from previous interactions. And Neil calls us up and he says, "Hey, you guys got something and I want it." And I said, "So you saw?" He's like, "Yeah, it's incredible." And I'm like, "Well, I mean, we're a couple weeks away from launch. We'll get you some in a couple weeks." And Neil was like, "No, I need it tomorrow."
Yeah.
So he's like, "We want to put it in some marketing stuff and we need to use it."
Yeah.
And yeah. So it's the pushiest I've ever had anybody come at me with, but not it wasn't a bad way. It was just like he was so excited about it. He's like, "Please, whatever, just give me something to work with," because that was really refreshing.
I think one of the reasons that he was probably so forward is Preston, our camera guy back here. He does a lot of other things at Hornady. We had a video shoot scheduled. That might have been on Friday that he reached out to you. We had a video shoot scheduled like Tuesday or Wednesday. It was like, we want that product in the product video and many other videos because it's topical. And if you're trying to do marketing material, you don't want to be using the shoot through the screen stuff or whatever. You want to use what people are actually using in that material.
What you think people are going to use in the month when we launch it?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that's the other question. So going up to the launch, you guys had to know, you had to test for yourselves to know, is this thing good? So you get the finished product, what you think is going to be the finished product, you got to test it. So did you guys stack this up against every other chronograph ever?
I mean, yeah, it didn't happen the weeks before launch, right? I mean, we tested this thing during COVID all the way throughout.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, one of our big moments that we knew that we had something was we went up to a ballistics lab in Michigan and we put it up against a very similar radar chronograph to what you guys have.
Yep.
And yeah, it was performing on par with that radar chronograph. And we were like, okay, we left there knowing that we really, truly had a product.
Yeah, that was the tipping point where we started to up our forecast a little bit and start to get, pretty excited about what we had done. So
that's phenomenal. And I will say we've paired it up against our Doppler radar, the same Doppler radar you used, and it's less than 1% difference every single shot that we've ever compared it to. At 5 inches, at 15 inches, we've done some stuff where we've really offset it just to induce some, angular rate problems, and it's always right there with a 6-figure Doppler radar. And this is something that's smaller than a deck of cards.
There was a funny moment on the third day of our testing where we were kind of having issues setting the radar head up that morning, the big one, not the little smaller one. And we were like, I was conversing with the guys, the low-level software engineers that Chad mentioned earlier, and going back and forth with them all morning long. And they're like, well, why don't they just true it to what we were getting? Because we're on par, so why don't they just use our numbers and then true it off of us, and then we can see if we're good or not? And I was like, all right, everybody needs to stop.
That was in February in Michigan. That's why I didn't go. I was like, hey, Phillip, that's all you, man.
It gets cold in Kansas and Olathe in February, too.
Yeah, not that cold.
I got to go on spring break, is what they called it around the office, and it was anything but.
That's definitely a neat trip. And so you guys go, okay, this is going to work.
Right.
You mentioned your forecast. Well, you launch this thing to the world. What happens next?
Everybody wants to be our friend.
Yeah.
I mean,
insane.
It's the calls from all the different firearms manufacturers and bullet manufacturers and just everybody that's doing any type of PRS and that kind of thing. It's really opened up the doors to a lot of cool opportunities and cool partnerships and friendships for us. So we're excited about what's to come in that space.
That's awesome. Well, the ease of use is probably one of the biggest things for me is like, you can give this to anybody. I'm sure my 8-year-old could figure out how to use it. And we did just use it. I got him a Ruger Precision Rimfire 22 long rifle. And got to know the muzzle velocity on that thing. Another important feature about this one specifically versus any other chronograph I've ever seen is the ability to accurately measure north of 4,000 feet per second. And that's a tall order. When you look at cartridges like the 204 Ruger comes to mind, you have a cartridge that with factory ammunition and with hand loads, it lives at 4,200 feet per second, let's say. It was very difficult to get a chronograph that would accurately measure that. So you know, there's a lot of 17 and 20 cal shooters that have various cartridges or Wildcats that had no idea how fast their loads were going because there was never a chronograph that could accurately pick that up. How difficult was that?
I mean, like, that was the whole mission, right? So we truly little peek behind the curtain, but truly our major problem to solve was, okay, arrows are easy. Arrows look like a bus. The smaller the projectile gets and the faster that it moves, that is truly like the hardest case.
Mm-hmm.
So really what we started to do was we were like, okay, what's the fastest and smallest cartridge that we can find? And we started running at like 4,200 feet per second, I think. And they were I think they were called controlled chaos. And it was to the point where it was like, okay, all the other chronographs on the market literally can't read it. And it wasn't until we went to the ballistics lab where we could get accurate readings on those super fast rounds that we were like, okay, we are actually on par and we are actually able to see it. But until then, we were just kind of going off of our numbers and what we had previously done below 4,000 feet per second and just hoping that it worked. Extrapolating a little bit, yeah. But that was really the point. But, I mean, some guys have pushed this thing up to 5,000 feet per second from what I've seen.
That's remarkable. That's no man's land for anything, I think.
The 22 Advanced Rifle Cartridge easily outperforms all other 22 caliber cartridges in its class, producing 22 250 performance in an AR-15 platform. The 22 ARC is engineered to take full advantage of the most aerodynamic 22 caliber bullets. This means tighter groups, increased accuracy, and an exceptional shooting experience. 22 Advanced Rifle Cartridge from Hornady.
But did you guys, obviously with the unit, I feel like you should have checked all the boxes that you were tasked with make this thing. I feel like you had to have hit those. And then from a sales standpoint, did you hit those? Did you check those boxes as well?
Yeah, we checked them and checked them and checked them and checked them.
That's great.
Yeah, we did. Our initial forecast was not anywhere close to what we were way under, and so we had a little bit of a delay getting the market and getting the pipipeline filled. But things are
now.
Yeah, and we finally got it launched in Europe, so now we're filling that pipeline. And I mean, it's been
worldwide.
There's a global response to it for sure.
I love it. Yeah. Are you guys familiar with the 17 HMR cartridge? Little 17 Hummer. So that was designed here at Hornady by senior ballistician Dave Emery, and he had a hard time pitching it to Steve Hornady, who, I won't bore you with the story on this show. We have a whole podcast dedicated to 17 HMR for listeners who want to go back to it. As we say in the podcast, Dave nearly lost his job over this cartridge. Anyways, he finally talked Steve Hornady into doing the 17 HMR, and they got a sales forecast, if you will, about what their first order was, and Dave insisted that was orders of magnitude too small. And as it turns out, Dave was right, because that thing went from 17 HMR, never heard of her, to instantly blew up. It was the hottest rimfire cartridge, and still one of the hottest rimfire cartridges out there by not just speed, but volume. People shoot 17 Hummer so much. So it's interesting to see that kind of parallel path where it was like, oh yeah, I think we'll need about this much. Yeah, maybe for the first quarter.
Yeah. But when you do something you've never done before, or in the world, right? Or if you do something at Garmin that we've never done before, we just really don't know, right? We kind of an idea of how big a customer base might be or whatever, but we really are just kind of like licking our thumbs and putting them, reading the wind.
Yeah.
So it's been a pleasant surprise, and I think that's going to drive some future products in our pipeline that I'm excited about. So.
Awesome. Well, obviously, guys, I'm not going to pry on that because that's all obviously super secret stuff, but it's great to hear for our listener that there are more innovative products in the pipeline from Garmin, and I really appreciate that, guys. So job well done on the old Zero. That thing is absolutely awesome. I don't know a single person who hasn't used it in the precision rifle community that isn't just, this is it, got to have one. That's great. Yeah. So well done, and hopefully you guys get the pat on the back that you deserve. Because it deserves it for sure.
Did you get a pat?
I think we had an ice cream party.
Yeah, ice cream party.
We had a little ice cream party.
You know what? I'll buy you guys dinner. How about that?
That'd be great.
Awesome, guys. Well, let's change gears a little bit. Garmin Zero, awesome product. Again, more innovation coming from Garmin. So looking forward to that. But we do have to change gears to the next topic. And every new guest that I have on this podcast, I ask a question to. And it's a tough question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I'm going to start with you, Shad. You got some time to think about it. So this hypothetical question, this hypothetical world, is you could have an infinite amount of firearms. Infinite. You could have as many guns as you want in any possible configurations. They can all be different. And you can have an infinite supply of ammunition. How great would that be? The catch-22 is if you had to pick one cartridge and one bullet to shoot for the rest of your life that would encompass any hunting or self-defense or competition shooting you may do, you had to pick one cartridge and one bullet, what would you pick?
Well, so as a product manager, I try to, I don't always, I can't be in I can't participate in every single product that we're making at any given time. But as we're developing it, I try to immerse myself in that world. So as we're developing the C1, I go out and I get my first PRS rifle. I've got a Seekins Havoc Hit Pro. So shooting the 6.5 Creedmoor in the 147 grain ELD match. So that's my answer. I don't know if I can hunt with that round, with the tip on there.
You might want to switch to the 143 ELDX if that's what you're after. The difference is the jacket thickness and the amount of lead in there, and then the interlock ring that's found in the ELDX. Shoot to the same accuracy standard.
Okay, well that's what I'll do then.
Awesome. And the Seekins, they crush it with everything that they do. So I can't slight you for that choice. That exact answer, a 6.5 Creedmoor with the 143 ELDX, has been one of the most popular answers on the podcast.
I'm in good company then with the kind of guests you have on here.
Yeah, well, arguable. All right, Phillip, switching over to you. One cartridge, one bullet. What do you have in mind?
Sure. I'm going to kind of lean back on my roots, I guess, in primarily hunting range, and I'm mostly within 200 yards, right? So I would probably say a 300 blackout with a...
190 sub X, go subsonic?
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, that's the key. You throw a suppressor on a 300 blackout with a 190 sub X, you could shoot 3-gun with it if you were in multi-gun. Actually, this weekend we had the Zombies in the Heartland 3-gun match. There were people shooting subsonic, and that thing hits like a friggin' hammer.
Yeah,
it's remarkable. 190 sub X on pigs, deer, antelope. It's weird because you suppressed, especially if you turn the gas off, you hear the firing pin hit, and then you hear the bullet hit the animal, and it's actually really effective.
Yeah.
So quiet. Another great answer. Great for home defense as well. So those are pretty solid answers. I gotta say, one of the more common answers over the last month has been 9mm. A lot of people leaning on 9mm, but I like your answers as well. Definitely no wrong answers, but certainly more right than others. Well, I don't have anything else for you guys. I promised you guys I'll buy you dinner, so I'll go do that. And thanks for coming on the show and giving us that peek behind the curtain of an outstanding product, the Garmin Zero C1. I really appreciate you guys coming up.
Thank you for your hospitality.
Yeah, thanks so much, Seth. That tour was awesome. Looking forward to tonight, and just appreciate you and Hornady and everything. So,
right on. Thanks again. Guys, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Hornady Podcast, where we took kind of a behind-the-scenes look of the development of the Garmin Zero C1, the hottest chronograph on the market right now. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you on the next one.